Educational GMAT. Your partner in your GMAT journey.
This is an official example since the early 1990s. Many airlines have been equipped with telephones for passenger use. First of all, are you guys clear with the argument? Are you guys clear with the argument? Let's put some numbers to it. Let's put some numbers to it. Suppose in the 1990s, let's say in the 1990s, when there were no cell phones, and the airlines started installing these phones in the planes. Let us say, let's say 100 people, all right, 100 people use the phones, and let's say each person paid $10. Correct? So then what's the total revenue? $1,000 from the phone calls made, right? Out of those $1,000, obviously, this would be split between whom? The telephone operator and the airlines. Correct? Now, what is the situation? Now, what is the situation? The usage has come down largely because of the cell phone availability. So let us say this usage from 100 has, let's say, declined to 5. That's a sharp decline, right? If these 5 people are paying $10, then what is the revenue now? $50, which is again being split between the telephone operator and the airline, correct? So which means that as an absolute number, the total revenue or the revenue share that the airlines gets, that has declined, but still the airlines has nothing to lose, right? The airline is still getting some additional revenue. The revenue is obviously lesser than what it was earlier, but it's still some revenue. Because after all, as far as the maintenance of the telephone equipment is concerned, that's a headache for the telephone operator, as per the argument. So this is what this is saying, right? Notice, uh, yeah, since airlines collect a portion of the charge for each call made without having to pay anything for the telephone equipment. So that equipment comes from the operator. Operator means telephone companies. So airlines clearly still benefit financially from the telephones, although that financial benefit would have reduced significantly from the 1990s, but still there is a benefit. If this is what we are concluding, then what's the assumption? Yes, guys. Yes, friends. Financially benefit, right? That's the key point. Financially benefit. What do you guys think is the answer, guys? What do you think is the answer? Okay, let's start with alpha. The proportion of the charge for an in-flight phone telephone call has not declined. What do you guys think about alpha? In fact, I would say even if it has declined, it's still a financial benefit, right? See, for example, the whole point is that installing the equipment is costing the airline zero, right? So whatever calls are made, the airlines get a portion of that, a percentage of the charges. Now, whether that percentage has declined or not declined, it would still be, even if it has declined, it could still be financially, uh, yeah, right, beneficial. That again, that financial benefit would come down, but it would still be financially beneficial. Okay. Now, how about Baker? Despite the decline in usage, the in-flight telephones remain profitable for the telephone companies that own and maintain them. That's not the right answer. Can someone tell me why? Because we are not talking about profitability of the companies. We are talking about profitability of the airlines. See, if these telephones are not profitable to the companies, they would obviously, what would they do? They would not install it in the airplanes, right? The point is that it is the act of installing of telephones by the telephone companies in the airlines is financially profitable for the airlines. Whether it is financially profitable for the telephone companies, out of scope. Out of scope. All right. How confident are you about Charlie? Absolutely. Notice that telephone equipment does not weigh enough to make a material difference in the fuel consumption of as in which airliners in which it is installed. Think about it. Think about it. So this is basically what the argument is concluding, that airlines collect a portion of the charge for each call made without having to pay anything for the telephone equipment. Hence, airlines benefit financially from the telephones. Now, mind you, while the airlines are not paying anything for the telephone equipment, but what if this happens? What if telephone equipment weighs enough to make a material difference in the fuel consumption of airlines? So now, while the airlines are not paying for the telephone equipment, they would be paying for the extra fuel that is being consumed because of the presence of these telephones on the airlines. So if this happens, then obviously airlines will not benefit financially from the installation of telephones. But since we are saying that this is the conclusion, what do we have to do? Eliminate this alternate cause. So the telephone equipment does not weigh enough to make a material difference in the fuel consumption. Now, David is actually very interesting, and I would like to discuss this. Why do you guys think David is not the right answer? Even passengers who rarely or never use an in-flight phones prefer that airliners be equipped with them. This actually seems to be a strong choice. Now, what does it mean prefer? Basically, what it's saying is that if there are in-flight phones, then passengers may prefer that airline. By preferring, we can definitely conclude that for those airlines, perhaps passengers are even willing to pay more for the ticket. Are you with me? And if this happens, clearly the airlines will benefit, whether or not people are using those telephones, right? Because it says even passengers who rarely or never use the in-flight phones still prefer them. So why do you think David is still not the right answer? The thing is, the thing is, even if you negate David, even if you negate David, right? Even passengers who rarely uh, or never use the in-flight phones have no specific preference, right, for airlines equipped with them. So even if you negate this, the conclusion is still valid. Why? Because the very presence of telephone equipments on the airline and the very fact that people are using it, even though much less frequently, would still make financial sense for the airline. Now, this is something that is very crucial, guys. Had this question been, which of the following would strengthen the conclusion? David would have been a very prominent answer. They would have been a very prominent answer because it is indeed strengthening the conclusion. It is giving us an evidence that provides us a reason to believe that they would financially benefit from the presence of telephones. But it's not an assumption, which goes back to what we discussed earlier, that pretty much all assumptions would be strengthening the conclusions, but not all strengthen the conclusions are assumptions. In other words, the argument or the conclusion does not need this to be true. Remember, assumptions are something that 100% must be true for the conclusion to work. Charlie must be true for this conclusion to work. David need not necessarily be true, even if they don't prefer, even if they do not have a specific preference, even if these passengers are not willing to pay more for airlines that have in-flight phones, still the airlines can definitely benefit financially from the telephones, because whatever fewer number of people are using the telephone, the airline gets a cut. So even if David is not true, the conclusion would still be valid. Which passengers use it or don't use it, again, is not really our botheration. Right? And hence Edward would be not really relevant to the conclusion. Any doubt, guys? Any doubt?